Hello and welcome to another episode of Celebrating Southbridge. I'm Ron Sanangelo, Southbridge Town Manager, and today's topic is going to be about illegal substances. As you all know, we have a major epidemic all throughout our country dealing with illegal drugs and the problems that result of that, and also with the problem with alcohol. So today I have two very special guests to talk about this issue with me. One is Councilor Steeves. Councilor Steeves, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. And we also have Councilor Nash is here as well. He's going to add his comments about what's going on in town and what's going on throughout our nation and what we can do to educate people about illegal substances. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So one of the big topics we're talking about today to kind of start this off is something called Red Ribbon Week. Mm-hmm. Red Ribbon Week occurs from October 23rd to October 31st. And basically it's an educational campaign that gives a chance for people to talk about the issue of illegal substances.
Right.
So talking about heroin and marijuana, all the different things that are illegal on the streets, or sometimes legal, as Councilor Steve was talking about it, what we can do to help prevent those kind of activities in town. So let me start with you, Councilor Steeves. Mm-hmm. Tell me, you're out in the community, you're a town councilor, You've been very involved in this community. Tell me your perception of the drug problem in town. And again, I want to be careful to say this is not just Southbridge, it's all across the nation.
Well, but, absolutely. I think part of the problem is that we, as a community, we've got a situation. I think it's interesting. I do a lot of reading on a variety of historical issues, and it seems some of the stuff that I've been reading, especially online, talks about how where our society currently is a lot like, honestly, where the Russians used to be in the early 90s. And their situation, they started having their issues with a lot of alcohol and drug addictions and those kinds of things. And we're kind of doing the same thing today. And I would really like to see us deal with these kinds of issues from a kind of a big picture perspective. I mean, obviously, we need to help make sure that individuals, as much as possible, avoid getting into addictions. And you've got kind of the medical issues that are surrounded with that. But then when you get to the bigger picture issues, as a whole, I think we need to help get our community in a position where everybody has what they need to survive and keep themselves on an even keel, so they don't feel desperate enough to go into an addiction in the first place. I mean, you figure you hear the whole idea of the quote unquote gateway drug theory, and I don't think we're going to get into a real debate over whether or not that's valid. Right. I personally don't think it is. But there's no doubt that we need to. There is some sort of a cutoff where, I think we can all agree that certain elements of the drug spectrum are not safe for people to be taking. Heroin, some of the harder drugs, and if we can figure out some way to give people the support in our community so that they know that they have other people to turn to, they won't feel desperate enough to turn to the substances.
Me and you, Gus, we attended a let's call it a meeting at the high school where Chris Herron came in and spoke to us. He's a former Boston Celtics star who came in and talked to us, and particularly the high school students, about the issue of substance abuse and drugs. And he said something that kind of stuck with me about, why do you need drugs to change who you are? Don't you feel good about yourself? And I think that's what you're kind of talking about.
Pretty much, yes.
What is causing people to use these illegal substances? How come they need that high to feel good? How come they don't feel about themselves, good about themselves as individuals? That was an important message, don't you agree?
Absolutely. And I think you see that often if you look at it from a psychological point of view, a lot of these kinds of issues, unfortunately, have a tendency to go back sometimes multiple generations in the same family. Mm-hmm. Because you start, like with his story, he was talking about how he had been growing up as a kid, not experiencing basically what life should be like for a kid. We have so much opportunity in this country and so many resources that kids should be able to take advantage of. And it's really sad that some kids in our communities never get to experience the stuff that they should be experiencing. Whether it be because in his case, his parents were alcoholic. Mm-hmm. In other cases, their parents are drug addicted. In some cases, they're never home. They may have broken families or whatever it is. There's any number of factors that are involved, and that doesn't mean that any one of these things necessarily means that the child will become an addict,
Right.
because it obviously, that doesn't necessarily, it's not causative.
So
but
what you're
it's certainly
saying is
correlated.
drug addiction isn't just a result of any one thing. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of
Oh,
factors
absolutely.
involved in drug addiction.
Yeah.
It's not like somebody just, okay, let me try it. It may they come from a family who is very involved with drugs or alcohol,
Often.
or are very desperate financial situations where they're not living that positive life, and they're looking to bring themselves up,
Right.
and using these drugs as kind of a helper to make them feel good, and
Sure.
that's bad when you're in that situation, and it leads to this kind of activity. So it's not just as simple as just say no to drugs. It's what is the underlying cause that might start a kid in that path.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why you look at back like in the 80s where you started seeing the first Just Say No campaigns. And as you might remember, back when we started talking about this issue in subcommittee, I was one of the skeptics because I remember those campaigns and they quite frankly didn't work. And I think part of it was because they were often coming from spokespeople who quite frankly had no experience with it.
Yeah.
They were saying, they didn't come out directly and say this, but you knew from kind of their background that they hadn't done it. They didn't know what they were really talking about. They were just saying, follow me because I say so.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody like Chris Herron has the experience and he can come in and say, I have seen these kinds of things. This is what it did to me. I mean, he talked about, for example, the fact that he had almost killed himself several times.
Yep.
He talked about the fact that he basically nearly drove his family away, and a few other related things. And he was alienating family members, and more importantly, I think he was talking about how he felt that he was betraying his own family members. I think it was his grandmother specifically, but some of the other people that were close to him. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of the hard drugs do. Is you get so focused on taking these substances to escape from your reality.
Yep.
And when you get to the point of doing that, you forget that reality, quite frankly, is real.
Yeah.
And when you start doing that, you start doing things in such a way where, as he was pointing out, and his story is not uncommon in this respect, where you start getting to the point where you will start doing anything to find the funds to get your next hit
That's correct.
of whatever it is.
And that's a major problem. Councilor Nash, I'm going to talk to you, and after this, I'm going to kind of go to Rick and Gus, because that's just, we're in a friendly conversation here. But Councilor Nash, tell me about what you perceive that's going on in the streets and the impact you see on community, business. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on illegal substances and what the town maybe should be doing.
Sure, certainly, Mr. Santangelo. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here alongside Councilor Steeves as well. Obviously, we've had a problem in the community for some time. I have been very privileged to have sat in on that same presentation with Mr. Herron. That message really struck a chord with me. I was so impressed with what he had to say to our high school students. I just want to make sure that I get this out to segue away, but one thing that I have kept in the back of my mind since that date was something that Chris Herron said, and that was back then and even now, while he's been in recovery, he has thought about, and users of substances would think about using and being addicted only when he or she didn't want to be himself or herself.
Right.
That is so true, and it's not just for heroin, illegal types of narcotic substances. It's true of those of us who have had family and friends with addictions to alcohol and other types of drugs. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out.
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem, absolutely. I thought about that long and hard, and I guess that as a very short time Southbridge resident, maybe my perspective's a little bit different coming from Cape Cod, where there is a very significant problem as well. Here in Southbridge, we have a very diverse community. It is, it's really kind of interesting to note that it's not a problem amongst one particular ethnicity or one particular age category, and that's where, when you're talking with folks around town, folks down here at Town Hall, the police and fire departments, the folks within the local resource community, with U Inc., with Harrington, with Spectrum Health Systems, there are so many different people that are affected by the epidemic. And I don't use that term too lightly. We hear it all the time, but it really does hit home with the deaths that we experienced the last couple of years especially. We're all touched by the problem. I think that looking forward once again to the Red Ribbon campaign that Mr. Santangelo brought to us, I think a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, education is definitely key. I want to make sure that folks in our community are focused on educating the youth. It's not just about treatment and recovery, it's about prevention. And this here is a fantastic way to just raise a little bit of awareness, starting at home, in the school system, with educators, administration, and then local businesses that are willing to participate, put a sign in their window, just to let the community know. If you're walking up and down Main Street or over at some of the shopping centers, we're aware that there's a problem, but we don't want to just accept and live with the problem. We want to prevent it.
Right.
So just to kind of bring some basics, some background to this, about a year and a half ago, I created something called a Southbridge Substance Abuse Council, and we put together a team of people, people from Harrington Hospital, people from our school system, people from Spectrum, from daycare, all different kinds of people to sit and talk about this and what we could do. And these two counselors who are not on the committee actually took their own time to come and be involved, which is why I invited them here today, because they showed that they really care about this issue and wanted to be involved. To their, they weren't even on the committee and they came, so that was really important to me. The task force came up with an idea to bring in a speaker, Chris Herron, who came into the school system, and we're looking at continuously ways to educate people and bring things together. And that's what this Red Ribbon Week comes from. It was another idea we brought forward on the task force, and then moving forward. And I want to talk about that. We're going to get into depth about that soon. But I just want to talk a little bit more about the bigger picture stuff first. And then we'll get more into the task force and how you, as a citizen, can help us educate people about about substance abuse and what we can do. Right. But let's talk a little bit more about the bigger kind of picture. Right. And Gus, I know that you are always kind of looking at the big picture on this and the impact. One of the problems we're seeing is the issue of opioids and the overdoses. And I think you are aware of what's going on with our fire department and the responses. Talk a little bit about that, the overdose issue itself, and what we can do in that area. And you may let people know, the general what the problem is and what's going on. I think you have a pretty good idea about that.
Yeah. Before I do, I just want to mention. I want to dovetail a little bit with what Rick said a second ago about. One of the key elements of what we need to do here is both with the education element. I see that as kind of a surface issue, but it opens the door to the community support that helps us deal with the kinds of issues where people start going off the deep end and getting addicted and getting overdosed. And part of it, with the overdoses, as we've seen that there's more and more research being done in the last year or two, especially, linking it to concerns about stronger than necessary even prescription drugs. They're often linked to fentanyl. They're often linked to some of the other opioid painkillers that serve a purpose. I mean, there are some circumstances, and like severe surgeries and things like that, severe pain, where people, it's understandable that they would want to take some sort of a substance to kill the pain, and that's a legitimate reason to use some of these things. The problem is that when the pain is reduced, but unfortunately they're often given enough of the drug so that the way that the brain works is that it basically the brain gets hooked on it. So that even when they can't tell that the pain's no longer there anymore, but they're hooked. And you start getting to the point where under some circumstances, they will get off of their drugs, whether it be fentanyl based, which is I believe illegal, but some of the other more common legal opiates that you can get from prescriptions in various places, usually surgery, hospitals, and then once their prescription runs out, they start going into withdrawal symptoms, and as far as they know, the only way to get the relief from the withdrawal symptoms is either to find more of the drugs or to go find some parallel drug, which usually is heroin.
Which is a big problem.
A huge problem.
Because the reason they go to heroin is because it's cheaper than the over-the-counter, so to speak, drugs and narcotics that doctors prescribe to you. So heroin, I hate to say it, you can get a bag of heroin now for $5 a bag that gives you one hit. And it's extremely dangerous, but it's a substitute for those opioids.
Oh, absolutely. Especially considering the fact that they're starting to find that in some cases, the heroin is being laced with fentanyl and some of these other things, which unfortunately they shoot up. They don't know it's been laced with it, and it can kill them. Especially if they've had situations where they find that their levels have dropped off a little because they got lucky and they were able to get off of it, detox for a little while, and then they go out and grab a dose and they don't know how strong it really is.
So Gus makes a good point here.
And that's when you get into the situation of fire department, police department responding and bringing out Narcan and saving them. And unfortunately, it saves them, and I put that in quotes really, because the only way to save somebody who's an addict is to get them in treatment. And that's where we need a lot more treatment beds, a lot more real serious long-term treatment, not just a couple of weeks, because that is maybe enough to just get you off the drugs. But you need some sort of a long-term therapy and community support, both inside and outside the therapy setting, so that they don't get back into the situation where they're getting hooked again. And that's so difficult.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because that was exactly what I was going to ask you or comment about. Is that, somebody overdoses, our ambulance responds to the call. They give them Narcan. That basically, it reduces the effect or turns around the effect of the opioid, and all of a sudden now they're not overdosing anymore. So it stops it. It's not a cure.
No,
it's a
not.
temporary kind of solution, but it saves their lives. And all of a sudden, people say, okay, they can literally walk away from that, not even go to the hospital, walk away, and then they do it again, and then they get this close each time to killing themselves. But it's weird. I mean, your mind, you're so addicted, you're taking that chance to kill yourself by doing it over and over again. And our fire department is hitting the same people 3 or 4 times with Narcan, saving their lives. And sooner or later, you're gambling with your life. You're going to lose that gamble.
Eventually,
right?
you will. Yeah.
No?
And it's interesting. From what I've heard, I don't know if this is true. Maybe somebody can answer the question. But I think from what I've read, is that Narcan actually only lasts less than an hour. And then the person, and I may be wrong, so if somebody knows this, please let me know. But it lasts less than an hour, and then the person starts overdosing again. I
haven't heard that. But I haven't heard that.
But I know it doesn't last forever. But it's amazing that some people will be basically near dead, and they get up and walk around, and then they're still so addled that they decide, I'm just going to go home. No, you need to go to the hospital.
It's
you need to get some help because you just about died.
It's exactly it. You just about died. That's really, I mean, how much stronger of a message can you get? You just barely survived, and you go right back to doing drugs again. It's so bad that the drug dealers sometimes, when you buy the drugs, they also provide you Narcan.
I've seen.
Imagine that. Here's your drugs, and here's Narcan in case you overdose, so you could save yourself. It's almost, they think it's like a protection, and it really isn't. It might save your life once, but sooner or later it catches up with you. I'm going to go to you, Councillor Nash. Again, I'm going to go back to Rick if you're okay with that.
Indeed, please.
So we're talking about the overdoses of people dying, and obviously the drug overdose issue, this epidemic is affecting people in all ways. I think it affects businesses. How would it affect businesses in production, and what happens with employees in the workforce? You know a little bit about that you could talk about?
Ron, I don't have a lot of experience in that realm, but I do have a little bit, and it stems back to when I first was out of college. I want to start there. I worked in Framingham for an auto auction where I was the environmental health, safety, and security manager. And we did perform both random drug tests, and we performed on-the-spot saliva tests way back then to detect narcotics if there were an accident or a workplace injury, things of that nature. And I can tell you from that little bit of experience all those years ago, production definitely was affected. More locally, with the sorts of businesses that we have in town, I have no doubt that there are businesses in our community that are affected where employees, anybody that may be employed or working within a particular business, and I don't think I'd get too specific. We have some very reputable businesses in town, and I wouldn't want to say the wrong thing, of course, but there's lost productivity time. There are, workplace types of incidents that could result in violence. I haven't heard too much about that of late. I hope we don't. Serious injuries, of course. But on top of it, the business owner's costs that are related to health care and for workers' compensation. If someone's injured on the job due to drugs or alcohol, I mean, there's a whole gamut of things that could be in play when it comes to workplace and narcotics, opioids, even alcohol.
Clearly, it costs. There's no question. It costs the country millions and millions of dollars of lost productivity as a result of this drug epidemic. Both through the healthcare costs and through accidents and lost time and all that. So it's a huge impact on society, not just on an individual, but as a whole. It damages our whole country, right?
Certainly, certainly.
So, Gus, let's talk a little bit more about I know you come to the Substance Abuse Council.
Yep.
And why don't you talk a little bit about, a big issue we've been talking about is developing a plan about how to move forward. And you can maybe talk a little bit about that. Why is it important to develop a plan? And we can tie that into some money the town council has approved
Right.
to deal with this issue. But tell me a little bit about why it's so important to develop a plan.
Well, I think that kind of stems back to what I mentioned a little while ago about the whole idea of the Just Say No campaign. I think back in the 80s, we saw a lot of these fairly good, basically propaganda efforts, where there was no science backing it. There was no exploration of what really worked. Whereas doing a campaign, I remember from what some of the guys from the state came up when that meeting we sat in on, where I forget their names at the moment, but where they came in and they made a point of saying that there are other things that other towns have done that actually work. I mean, I don't want to see us, both a matter of spending money, but more importantly, I don't want to see us investing the time and energy and trying to get people's hopes up in a campaign that doesn't have something to back it and say, okay, we know that this is actually has shown some sort of effect that actually benefits the people. You know, there's no point in doing something that doesn't work.
Right.
So if we set up a plan, and we also, I mean, it's also a part of from the financial point of view, you know, we have to be responsible stewards of the public's money. And, you know, all of us are taxpayers, so none of us want to see money get wasted on stuff that doesn't work. So if we set up something that we think can work, and we've got some evidence that shows that it will, with somewhat what some of the other towns have done, then we can have a better chance of being able to show that, you know, we are having some effect, and it's not breaking the budget.
You know, it's interesting, Gus, because truthfully, I had a little bit different perspective of the program you talk about than you do, but the more you talk, the more I kind of understand, maybe more agree with you.
So what's your perspective?
So my perspective was, I like the fact that there was a national message, that there was something out there in the nation where they were trying to do some effort to spend money to get to all the states at once. Now,
Right.
the way you're talking, I'm thinking about the effectiveness of that campaign.
Exactly.
Was it effective or not? And I'm not sure that it was.
I don't think it was,
I
yeah.
can remember those commercials as a kid,
Yeah, me
Just
too.
Say No and Nancy Reagan.
Right.
So I remember the message. Did it or did it not have an impact on my life? That's a good question. I don't know. But it frustrates me that here at the local effort, we're trying to create some educational campaign, trying to do something, and I really feel like it'd be better spent if there was a nationwide effort at it. So I'd love to see
That's
a
true.
nationwide effort,
Right.
but maybe adding what you say, accountability that it actually works, and there's some scientific background about, okay, we're going to spend millions of dollars on a national level, what really works and what kind of campaign is going to have impact versus just a propaganda, just say no campaign.
Well, if we're going to do a nationwide campaign, I think besides doing the outreach, the kind of outreach that we're talking about on the street level, to families and the communities and those kind of things, I think we also need to do some serious legal changes in terms of starting to go honestly go after the big pharma and break down some of their monopolies, for one thing, and also the fact that there's been some evidence coming out in relatively recent time to show that they were playing, shall we say, loose and fast with the facts as far as whether their substances are addictive or not. So if you're taking something that you don't think is addictive, and then you're suddenly addicted, you end up having to find something else that's possibly harder and may kill you. You know, we got to break that chain somewhere, and there's multiple levels of responsibility here.
You know, Gus, I'm smiling because, you know, I think you're right in this issue, right? I look at, sometimes we talk about the big drug dealers out in the street, we need to go after them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm confused at who they are. A lot of us picture the big drug dealer as, you know, a guy with a hoodie that has millions of dollars of cocaine and he's stealing on the street. And maybe the big druggie is a little bit more professional than that. Yeah, you know, that's clearly one group.
Wall Street office.
But is there another group of people in the pharmaceutical industry that's being fast and loose with the hard drugs that they're using
Sure,
and not
absolutely.
playing by rules,
Yes.
and it's causing this drug addiction?
Sure.
So maybe the drug addict is not just a criminal drug addict we're looking at, but also, as you say, some of these big businessmen, and I'm pro-business, but I'm wondering if the biggest drug dealer isn't the pharmaceuticals or, quote, the doctors who are prescribing too much of these drugs to their patients, and that's a problem too. So this is not just a, quote, criminal problem,
No.
but it is also a, you know, I hate to say it, the root of all evil sometimes is money.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Well,
whenever you can make
yeah.
money, whatever it is, people are willing to sell whatever it is, healthy or not, to people to make money. And maybe the pharmaceuticals, the doctors all have a role in this. needs to be dealt with as well. And I'm going to kind of
Yeah.
pop over to you, Rick, for
Okay,
your
can
thoughts
I
on that.
chime
But
in
go
on
ahead.
this one?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
First of all, I want to step back for just a second because I think you asked about a plan.
Yep.
But before we continue that conversation, when I was a youngster was when the Drug Abuse Resistance Education, the DARE program, was presented.
Right.
There was a national message, more or less. It tied in very closely with the program that that at least my younger brother participated in. I might have been early teens at this stage, but it was called Kids and Cops versus Cops and Kids. And I remember the intention was there to educate the youth of our community. And I lived in Maine at that stage. There were a lot of things that went on with community policing, which had been developed. The cops were involved, the police officers, just to be respectful. There were students that were student athletes at the University of Maine. I grew up near the University of Maine, and I remember my heroes were the basketball players Matt Rosignol, Coco Berry. Coach Casey Jones from the Boston Celtics was on a trading card that we had. There were good intentions, and there were materials that were presented. The lasting effects, I couldn't tell you.
Right.
But I certainly don't think that they have been as positive as we would have liked. This was 30 years ago now.
Sure.
To take that a step forward, within our community, I know that we have committed resources in our local authorities, with the police and fire departments. They are always approachable. I know that they're out to do the best that they can with every bit of money that we can give them to fight the illegal narcotics problem.
Yep.
However, is that where we're going to focus? Is it just on the illegal narcotics, or is it the prescription? And this goes hand in hand with talking about a plan.
Sure.
Where do we concentrate our efforts? When it comes to education and awareness, the program that we'll touch on here in a minute, I'm sure, is a good first step.
Right.
But where do we put our real resource? Is it in the illegal behind the police department and the fire department's effort, or is it in educating and preventing through prescription medication that may be in everyone's homes?
So I look at it as a multi-prong approach here,
Right.
right? And
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you, we're a very small piece of this problem. This is a national problem, and our resources are very, very small. We're not going to dent this, let's be honest.
Right.
We put $25,000 aside to help do something because the issue is so bad, but that's nothing in comparison to the problem,
Absolutely.
right?
Right, sure.
So I look at this as a law enforcement issue for one component of the problem, a treatment component, and an education component. That's kind of
Sure,
the way I break
absolutely,
it down, those three
absolutely.
components. So on a local level, we can help a little bit on the education side. I have the police department, going after drug dealers and making arrests on that side. Spectrum is doing the treatment side. The Harrington Hospital's doing. So we're hitting it from all levels that we can.
Right.
But let's face it, 25 grand ain't gonna do much. So to me, that's where I really want the national government to really take this thing and come out with something more substantive. And, they're throwing money. Truthfully, they are throwing a lot of money in treatment, more than they ever did in the past. But I don't know what the national message is on drugs anymore. It's kind of gone. So, but I get the Nancy Reagan program didn't have enough, but there has to be some message, and there's zero right now.
Right.
And that bothers me because I can't solve that problem from a Southbridge perspective. They've got to deal with that. I can chime in. I should be chiming into a national campaign, but not trying to figure out how do we get one out, from the bottom starting up. You know what I mean? And-
Well, I
and
think
that's
a big
the
part of
frustration.
that, actually, you mentioned the idea earlier a minute ago of community policing, and that made me think of something. Is that just like with the way policing is done and a lot of other things we see in our society, but things go through cycles.
Absolutely.
And it seems like something comes down the pike and says, "Oh, we're going to do this now," and all of the effort, all of the momentum and effort that gone into going this way, something goes this way. And I think that's a big part of the whole issue when it comes to dealing with addictions, is the fact that we haven't for a long period of time had a consistent practice of how are we as a community going to address this consistently. I think a big part of it is getting into the households, getting into families, and recognizing, as trying to have, I guess you can say, I think a big part of it is really creating role models and setting it up so that people to kind of get into the idea of what we can do, kind of more specifically encouraging people to do. You mentioned the idea of whether or not about dealing with both illegal drugs and legal ones, and I think a part of it to start with is we need to start encouraging people to, if they are for some reason they have a prescription, they need to make sure that they lock it up. So that their kids can't get to it.
Right.
And honestly, I think to some degree that may be true of alcohol as well. I mean, I think all of us, when we were in high school and we weren't 21, it was illegal to drink. How many of us did?
So,
Most
so
of us
with
did.
that, I want to cut you off.
'Cause it was there.
Looking at you out in the audience and speaking directly to you, one of the key points that Councilor Steeves just mentioned is taking care of your own medication, your own alcohol in your own home,
Yep.
and making sure you're monitoring that closely. I know that all of us, we tend to blatantly trust our own kids and stuff, right? But let me tell you, there's kids out there doing drugs, and maybe it's your kid, maybe it's not. We don't know. But by actively making sure you protect your drugs, stuff that you get legally and you use for real healthcare issues, and making sure that they're in a safe, locked place that nobody else can get a hold of them. Because those drugs, they have a real street value now. They're worth a lot of money.
That's true. Yep.
And you put those on the street, and these kids could be making hundreds of dollars off of one bottle of pill you might have got from your doctor, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that can happen. And I would add to that also, I think that it's also important for parents to treat to encourage their own kids to be responsible and to treat their kids as though they were responsible. Because if you assume your kids are going to be irresponsible, they often are.
Right.
But if you sit down and talk to them and tell them, okay, this is my prescription, I need it for this reason. These are the side effects. You really shouldn't be using this.
Yeah.
And allow them to ask the questions, and let them know that you care and that they can come to you with concerns.
Absolutely.
I mean, it kind of ties back to the whole idea of, we were talking earlier about the lack of self-esteem that gets people into addictions in the first place. A big part of that is not feeling that you can talk to your own parents.
Sure.
So it's interesting. I'm going to get into this with Councilor Nash as well. But, one of the things we talked about in the Chris Herron thing is the whole issue of self-esteem and
Right.
being careful with your own prescriptions and stuff like that. But what if you're a young kid, you're 12 or 13 years old, and it's not you who are doing the drug, but it's your mom or dad who are doing the drugs?
Right.
How do you deal with that 13-year-old kid? I mean, what kind of role model are you being for that child? And how does a kid, when their parents are doing it, it looks like, it's completely acceptable. And even if the kid doesn't do drugs, he's in a very difficult life situation,
Yep.
right?
Certainly.
So
Sure.
I just want to make sure that, we talk about kids a lot because we're trying to stop it from a prevention thing at an early age. But
Right.
to you adults that are out there that are using these illegal substances, you're not setting the kind of role model for your children you need to be doing. And keep in mind that what you're doing, your kids, they're smart. They pick up on it and it looks acceptable to them. You got to be really careful because kids do what you do, and that's a reality.
Absolutely.
Councilor Nash, or Rick?
Absolutely, Ron. And I'll tell you, that message from Chris Herron at the high school was a strong one. And I mean that. I don't have children, but I care about the community, as I believe, as much as Councilor Steeves. Gus is a good man.
Right, yeah.
Everyone on the council, I believe, is behind whatever we can do.
Right.
And kind of to close the loop, if that's where we were heading when it comes to a plan, I remember something that you've said repeatedly, Ron, and that is that after a certain time frame within the last year or so, there were several deaths that were related to overdose. And a certain counselor had reached out to you and asked, hey, what can we do? Can we get some
He
money?
wanted $100,000.
He wanted $100,000. And believe me, I would have been in the same position had I been in his shoes. But at the same time, I remember a conversation that was held when the state was here for that substance abuse committee meeting at the police station. The gentleman from the Department of Public Health did not want us to rush to spend that money that the council had appropriated and given to you.
Right.
To the town manager's discretion.
Right.
Now it makes perfect sense. We don't fully understand what all facets and aspects of this problem are in our
Right.
community. How do we go about implementing some sort of program? We do need a good plan. I believe that the pieces are in place with your committee that you did assemble, with the council's backing, with community involvement, with the educators, the administration, Dr. Townsend at the high school, everybody. Everyone has good intentions. Now let's meld it together. Let's get it to gel. So I hope you don't mind that I took
No,
it
actually, I
back
want to
there.
talk about
Oh,
that
that's
because
good.
that was
Yeah,
really
that's good.
important. So a counselor called me and said they got a call from a constituent, a citizen in Southbridge, whose child had died, young child, 19, 20-year-old, had died of an overdose, and said, Counselor, what are you going to do about this? And the counselor's like, and he called me up and said, listen, we need more police enforcement. We got to bust these drug dealers. We got to go after them. I want $100,000 for police overtime. We're going to go after them. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I can spend that $100,000 in a month.
Yep.
Now, what do we do after that?
Right.
Because it goes back to your consistency issue, right?
Sure, absolutely.
$100,000, well, I can get rid of it in no time at all, and we can arrest more drug dealers. And the sad part is they go through the criminal justice system as fast as we arrest them. They're back on the streets selling drugs.
Right.
Either that, or even if they end up in jail, somebody replaces them.
Yeah, or there's some new
Yeah.
dealers out there. So money's not the issue. And when I went to council asking for $25,000, I'm looking for something to help. I recognize that this is not even going to dent the problem, but we have to participate in this problem. everybody's got to get involved in this issue. And if we can put a little bit of resources to kind of get the ball rolling, to get some speakers, to do some drug education, maybe send information to doctors, anything that kind of reduces this problem. And if every town did it, if every state did it, the federal government did it, we can make a difference. But I'm not saying give me 25 grand, I'm going to solve the drug problem.
Right.
It's just
Oh,
not
sure, absolutely.
realistically, you know.
Ron, I'm really glad, and I think Gus would agree with me, that our community is interested in taking some sort of step,
Yeah.
just a step to mitigate the problem. We're heading in that direction. We're already doing that with the formation of the committee, with the involvement of the schools, with the involvement of the council, and those in our community that are willing to participate. And I think we'll get good support once
Listen,
again.
we've got good treatment here. I mean, we got Harrington Hospital, who's great treatment of people that have drug problems. And if you have a drug problem, please go to Harrington Hospital. They have a diversion program, divert you from the emergency room to counselors that can help you with this issue. Spectrum Health Center is another place that you can deal with families. There's a family group in town that does drug addiction things. The police department, you can go to the police department and tell them you have a problem, and they'll help you find treatment as well. The police department, I can tell you, I put pressure on them all the time. You bust the drug dealers, especially the high level ones, the ones that are selling the big quantities. Go after them. We're putting more pressure than ever before on them.
Sure.
But it's bigger than us. I hate this. It's bigger than us. So we're taking every step we can as a community to deal with this issue. So I want to change the topic now because this show lasts an hour, and I want to get into specifically the Red Ribbon Week and why that's important. And this is where I want you to be involved. So I'm really wanting you to pay attention to this because we need your help to deal with some of these issues, right? So Red Ribbon Week, and you can look at redribbon.org is the website. And basically it's a national campaign. It's an educational campaign that gives you activities you can do to help spread the message of drug abuse and frankly opens up the dialogue between a parent and a child or a teacher and a child or anybody, any family members. We have to talk about this. We can't sweep this problem away.
That's the critical factor. I mean, I think because in a lot of these cases where we're seeing is just like with regular, whether it be a prescription drug or an illegal drug, the issue is people can't express their pain. And so when you get a chance to sit down and take out, for example, you've got this in front of you, so I'll just pull it out.
The pledge.
One of these pledges. I mean, they also exist in Spanish. And the whole point is that it basically gives you a chance to sit down and you sign up to do it, and you say that you are pledging to grow up safe, healthy, and drug-free. And more importantly, what it is, it's not so much what it says on the piece of paper, it's the fact that if you can get, say, for example, you and your kids to sit down and use it as a discussion point to start talking about the issues surrounding it, about how they feel about certain things, about how, what their views of, for example, drugs are, the various kinds of things that are out there, what their issues at school are that they may be stressed out about or whatever. And more importantly, hopefully you can, if you're truly honest about it, about yourself, you can use it to open the door to addressing some of the family background stuff that is usually involved in the drug addiction.
Gus Steeves hit it right on the head. This is about communication. This
Absolutely.
whole week is about communication. And again, it's from October 23rd to the 31st, and it's called the Red Ribbon Campaign because the red ribbon is a symbol of opening up the communication. So you'll see all town employees, people at the school system, all kinds of people wearing a red ribbon during that week. And there's going to be some red ribbons tied to trees, and there'll be signs up on downtown businesses. And what we're asking is for you to sit down and have that conversation with your child, with another family member. Let's start that communication and bring out the message to everybody in town so that we can start the process. I mean, because it starts with discussion.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've seen for years. People hide out drugs. It's like, oh, my kid's on drugs. I can't talk about it. It's taboo. I'm going to ruin the reputation.
Right.
You just can't deal with it that way. What do you think, Councilor Nash?
Ron, like I've said, I don't have children, but I remember being a kid and when my parents started chatting with me about healthy choices, whatever they may have been. They may have been drug-related. They may not have been. Might have been related to alcohol use. But at the end of the day, the hard conversations are the ones that we need to have most with our kids.
Right.
And likewise, our kids, our students ought to be able to have the same conversations with their parents, bring their concerns home.
Right.
I love that Councilor Steeves, that Gus brought up the pledge. That is so key. What a nice, easy door opener to begin that conversation. It may not be the only topic of conversation, but it
shouldn't be.
certainly could
Yeah.
be something that's worked up to if you're talking with your children about what's going on in school, what sorts of things are you learning, what sorts of seminars are upcoming, what sorts of trips or athletics are going on. You know, these are so critical this stage of the game.
Right.
And I love that phrase because we as a community, we've seen the problem, we've recognized it when it comes to opiates, narcotics, prescription drugs, alcohol. It's out there, and
Right.
our children deserve our best. Now, granted, I'm not going to go walk up to any student and offer to be a sounding board, but you, as parents, I hope will take that initiative to have the conversation with your kids. And the Red Ribbon Campaign, which had its foundation, I think, over 30 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, Ron, with a gentleman who was a DEA agent who was killed. He was tortured and murdered. That's what got this all started. When I read that story, I was just fascinated, and I'm so glad that it's come to our community with something just to raise awareness. It's a wonderful step. If we can get everybody in the community involved by putting a sign in the window at their business downtown, if you can wear a ribbon around school, I believe that all the schools are buying in. Up at the hospital, I'll be wearing my ribbon every day that week. I know that Ron and Town Hall employees bought in last year. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. But what's more, to be aware of the resources that we have if you have trouble communicating with your children or with your students. There are resources in town that can help you have those conversations. There are resources if you discover a problem. You know, we at Town Hall, Ron and his Town Hall, your counselors, your I'll say elected people, it isn't about politics. It really is about spreading the message that, one, we care, two, we want to help, and three, we're not going to let this problem take over our community anymore.
Right.
At least that's how I feel. I'm so upset every time I hear that there's a problem. I'm so glad every time I hear that there's an arrest or a conviction. And just starting with a red ribbon on your lapel or on your shirt or on your sport coat is such a good message to send. So
Actually, if I can go-
Redribbon.org. Remember that out there.
Absolutely.
Redribbon.org.
If I can play off of what you just said actually a second ago, you mentioned that you're glad when you see somebody get arrested, and I'm glad to see that somebody is no longer hurting somebody else. However, I personally believe that every time somebody gets arrested, it's a sign that we are not doing the job adequately. Because it shouldn't be a point where we have somebody who's in the community who feels a need to go find a legal substance. I mean, if we can figure out some way to get the communication that we've been talking about really active and healthy again, get our community sense back again, the people will have no reason to go to the black market. And ideally, it would be nice to see the black market just wither away. And I realize that's pie in the sky.
Yeah.
You know, reality is that's not going to happen anytime soon.
I'm with you, Gus, but I just want to make sure that you're clear. It's about the distributors.
I know,
it's
I
about
totally
the
understand.
sellers.
Yeah.
I get that.
But you're right.
Absolutely.
And every time we hear about the problem,
Yeah.
it's in our papers, it's on Facebook.
Yep.
And I want to
Right.
just supplement this, Ron. You at Town Hall have a Facebook page. You spread the message. There are Facebook pages for the Red Ribbon Campaign, for the Heron Project. There is so much information that's available. I hope people will do a little bit of search when they see this.
Right.
Become more educated yourselves.
So we got about 10 minutes, and I'm going to really focus now on the Red Ribbon Campaign and what you can do and how you can be involved. You know, Councilor Steeves Gus pointed out very clearly about this pledge. And this is a pledge between a parent and a child, and you can get it right off of the Red Ribbon Week campaign. And our school system will, in fact, be doing this and giving them to kids. There's a pledge made specifically by the child and a pledge made by the parent as well.
Yep.
And it opens up that conversation in that respect. And I've had an opportunity to talk to Councilor Carrasco and Councilor McKenzie about this as well. About how can churches, for instance, get involved? Maybe our churches on one of those Sundays can, talk a little bit. The pastors or priests can talk a little bit about this problem. Right from the stage or the pulpit.
Right.
Pulpit and talk about this issue. Maybe you can ring your church bells to send a message about this. Maybe you can have your handout during your church congregation red ribbons and ask them to help spread the message. So that's one way churches can do it. Because I think I handed you something on parents. Do you still have that?
Yeah.
So there's a sheet of what can you as a parent do outside of doing the pledge with your child. What other kinds of things can a parent do to get involved in this campaign?
Well, honestly, I think one of the biggest things you can possibly do, honestly, is get to know your kids.
Yeah.
Get to know your kids' friends as well.
Yeah.
Give them something to do that reinforces their strengths.
Yeah.
As opposed to just having them sit there in front of the computer or whatever. Get them involved in doing things that actually burns off their energy and their time and gets them to know each other, gets them to know other people, gets them in contact with people who are responsible role models, people who are involved in the community, people who care, people who listen. You know, and I mean that is the basic gist of parenting. Anyway, it should be. But I think we have too many situations where it's a situation where we got parents that are focusing too much on their jobs, or sometimes on some other thing, whatever it is, and they forget that their kids are the most important things in their lives.
He's talking about, our children need to have good self-esteem.
Absolutely.
And part of
And that
having
comes
good
from being
self-esteem
parented.
is complimenting your child, talking about the good things they do, making them feel good about who they are as a person. Because if they don't feel good about who they are, they're going to look for ways to make themselves feel good. So it's really helpful. And I mean, you build self-esteem, it's got to be real. It just can't be false compliments. But you have to work with them to give them really positive reinforcement as a parent to your kid.
It's by showing them more than telling them.
Yeah.
Be the person that you want them to be.
Now, some side things can you do as a parent?
Yeah.
You could take a red ribbon, you could put it on the tree in your front yard to show that you're a red ribbon family and that you support the cause. You could wear a red ribbon to work. You could talk about your coworkers. You can wear it around town as you go shopping to show that you're part of this and open up that communication. Kids, what can kids do?
Right. Before I get into kids,
okay.
Ron, can I just stress, and I know I'm emphatic with some of these statements.
Yeah.
I hope parents don't make any assumption that they don't need to have these conversations.
Oh,
every
absolutely.
student, every child can be affected.
Absolutely.
And please, let's not keep blinders on. Let's make sure we're having these conversations. I think that's the first most important thing that we've got to get across.
Sometimes you find addicts, the people you don't expect to be addicted are.
Absolutely.
You never know. I mean, if I may jump back just for a second, a while ago, you talked about the issue that it's in every race, it's also, it's interesting is that often we've seen evidence that shows that it's, I think that at the upper echelons of socioeconomic issues, it's easier to hide it.
Yes.
That doesn't mean it's not there.
Absolutely.
And it is everywhere, so the only way to address it is to open the door and let light in.
Right, absolutely. And when it comes to students, like Ron had just asked, there is a planning guide that's available online on redribbon.org that Ron has mentioned a couple of times. There's a wealth of information there and one simple PDF that you can download. Among the things for parents and students, there are lists and activities. There's a photo contest that's being held nationally, an essay contest with prizes for students that participate. I think one's like $1,000 or an iPod can be won. More locally, if there's an opportunity to have local essay contests or wear the ribbons in the schools, have rallies, seminars, education, of course. A couple other things that jumped out at me within these lists here, Ron. Organize a Miles of Quarters campaign. Watch the Natural High celebrity videos. There are videos online on YouTube through redribbon.org. There is just so much that can be done. I'd urge everybody to download that simple little PDF off of redribbon.org. One thing we haven't touched on, but when it comes to Red Ribbon, every year they change the motto or the theme, and this year it is, your future is key, so stay drug-free. That's what that photo or poster contest is all about. Every year they're going to choose a high school student to establish a new motto. Really kind of cool. That's what's going to be on the posters that we're distributing. I know that Councillor McKenzie and I, in particular, I think Councillor Steeves is going to try to help out as well, Ron, to go around to local businesses and try to get some of these posters in business windows. So when you see that, that's how it all got started. A student came up with that theme, and it's a nice little message to send.
So again, how can you be part of the Red Ribbon campaign? And why do I say this is because the more people involved in this campaign, the more the message is out there, the more we say as a community that we're not going to tolerate this illegal drug stuff and that we're going to do something about it. So you can play a factor in that. You can wear a red ribbon. You can talk about drugs. You can bring this message out about treatment. You can help a friend or a neighbor you know that's involved with this stuff to get help. There's a lot you can do, and if we all do it, if every one of us gets involved in this campaign, think about the impact it could have on our community, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, I can have our police department arrest people, but that's not the solution. As Gus says, it's kind of, we failed because we let you get to that point. We failed. So I need you guys to get involved. And again, I've said it like 5 times, I'm going to say it again. redribbon.org. Look at the planning guide. You can put in your name and address. You can download the planning guide. It has all kinds of pictures that kids can draw. It has the pledges. It has signs you can put up. Go to your local craft store. Buy yourself a roll of red ribbon. Give it out to all your friends and say, I'm giving out red ribbons because I care about you. I care about your future. Wear this red ribbon. Send a message, an anti-drug message to our community. It's not going to cost you much to buy a red ribbon. Michael's a craft store. They all have ribbons. We had a ton of them we're doing for all our employees, and I was excited. Last year they actually had a Christmas tree with red ribbons on it and pledge cards we had in Town Hall, so that employees were making a pledge and bringing pledge cards home with their kids and doing a pledge. Do that. If you're an employer and you want your employees to do a pledge with their kids, give out pledge cards and say, hey, if you do that, we'll put it on the wall at our local business and we'll let people know. If you're a retailer and you want to give out ribbons to your customers, please, get some ribbons, give it out. Tell them you're being part of the Southbridge campaign, you're being part of the community. We need you. A church leader, come on. You guys are spending a message about morals and things that you guys can lead the charge here and talk about this issue. So it's all encompassing, right? I mean, we could all get involved and do our thing here.
Absolutely. Ron, we have more resources in this town than a lot of people might realize beyond Red Ribbon. I just want to make sure that people are aware, like I had said, there are pages on Facebook. Ron can share through the Southbridge Town Hall page. I'll put it on my page. We have the Chris Herron Project, which was hopefully as impactful as we thought it was at the high school. Locally, for hard copy brochures and pamphlets, we have a rack in the library right over near the research desk. I know that there's one in Town Hall in the main lobby. Down. If you're coming to pay your water bill or stopping by the town clerk's office, or coming up to see Ron, please take a look. There's a lot of information there. I know the police and fire departments and the school systems have pamphlets as well, English and Spanish from the ones that I've gathered, and some of that information might help if parents are looking to have a conversation with their children, but also maybe the other way. Maybe students want to bring this up to their parents.
Those racks are great, and those racks are a result of the Substance Abuse Council. We ordered the racks, we got it out there. And you're right, there's at the library, it has all information about drug treatment and the problem itself. At the police department, it's also there. Town Hall, it's there. Our daycare center has it. So we're spreading that message out. There are areas where you can go get information. Library is the easiest. You go to the library, there's a whole rack of information, and they're going to be involved in this Red Ribbon campaign as well. So the information there, it just takes a little bit of work to stop to the library and get it, right?
Yes, sir. And Ron, I want to make sure before you end up closing that as a newer participant to town government, but also as a concerned citizen, I've been so impressed with the activities of the Substance Abuse Committee. In particular, I want to make sure we give a nod to Deputy Chief Jose Dingy, Chief Woodson, Fire and Assistant Fire, Deputy Fire Chief, and then all the good citizen members that have stepped up and are participating in that community. My neighbor is on that committee, and I'm so grateful we have good, resourceful, knowledgeable, and caring individuals that want to make a difference in our community. Good work putting that together. I think that we're making progress, and we're so grateful that people are stepping up.
Spectrum Health Systems has been a big player. They're the ones that actually came up with the money for the Chris Herron event. Harrington Hospital, our daycare, has been very involved. Community Connections is another one. A lot of organizations, our school system, are trying to all work together to coordinate these kind of events. So kudos to everybody on the Substance Abuse Council, and kudos to the counselors who put up some money and have been supportive of it as well. So, and kudos to my employees who are really behind this event. And you'll see, if you come to town hall that week, they'll all have red ribbons on, and they're excited about this because they feel like they're making a difference, and that's what it's all about, right? We're trying to make a difference in the community.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So again, I want to thank you two for being my guest today. This is to me, it's an important issue, and I think to you it's an important issue. I want to thank you two specifically, and Councilor McKenzie been showing up at our task force meetings for your involvement in this. We're all going to continue to work together to try to, I hate to say this, make baby steps, because I wish we were making giant steps, but honestly, we're going to do what we can as a community here in Southbridge to continue these efforts. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank you in advance. We need your help. I'm not going to lie to you. We can't do it alone. We need you, and I'm thanking you now for your involvement in this campaign. Get involved. Look at redribbon.org. Look at the planning guide. See what you can do to be part of this. And thank you for your support. As me as a town manager of the town council, we appreciate all you do, and we're going to do our best to spend your tax dollars in a good, logical way. We're not going to waste them even dealing with this drug issue, but we think this is a critical issue, and we need to move forward to save people's lives. And in a lot of cases, just to improve people's lives. Because drugs, they deteriorate people's lives in such a bad way. Even if they don't die, it's very destructive. Again, thank you for tuning in to Celebrating Southbridge, and I continue to bring this show, and hopefully we'll touch on important issues as we go along. Thank you, and I appreciate once again you guys joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.